Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Sandy Smith, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Corporal Anne Collishaw. Animals have been put to many uses in war, serving as transport, beasts of burden, messengers, protectors, mascots, and pets. They have played an important part in all wars in which Australians have been involved. Famously, of the 136,000 Australian horses sent to the First World War, only one returned. After General Bridges died in May 1915 from a wound sustained at Gallipoli, his favourite horse, Sandy, returned to Australia, eventually finding a home at the Australian War Memorial. While the donkey was made famous by Simpson, it's perhaps the best known example of a beast of burden. Mules were in constant demand to carry supplies to the front line as well. The Camel Corps was formed in the early years of the First World War. By late 1917, the Desert Mounted Corps had some 6,000 camels. The homing ability and navigational skills of carrier pigeons saw them used during the First and Second World Wars. Some were even awarded medals for gallantry. Working dogs were used by the Royal Australian Engineers in 1918, with sappers handling messenger dogs in the trenches of France. Search dogs were used from 1944 after the raising of the 1st Australian Dog Platoon. Mine detection and scout dogs were used in Korea and Vietnam, and explosive detection dogs were used to counter the threat of improvised explosive devices in Afghanistan. During the First World War, many Australians brought animals from home to the training camps in Egypt. When the war ended, they were donated to the Cairo Zoo. As late as the 1950s, it was said to have had the largest collection of Australian native animals outside of Australia. Since then, a selection of dogs, cats, goats, possums, rams, eagles, monkeys, turtles, and many more have acted as formal or informal mascots for Australian units. Today, on the National Day of War Animals in Australia, we commemorate the deeds and sacrifices of animals in war. We warmly welcome Mr. John King, President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. And as always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in
The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Denis Callinan. Denis Callinan was born in 1888 in the town of Inverell in New South Wales. Known as Denny to his friends and family, he was one of 13 children born to racehorse trainer David Callinan and his wife Emmeline. Denis grew up in the suburbs of Sydney and attended a Catholic convent school in Kensington. Horses and horse racing were a big part of Denis's childhood, and he went on to train in Randwick to become a jockey. Over the course of his career, Denis won multiple races and cemented a reputation as one of the country's best jockeys. He was still working in this field in 1914 when the First World War broke out. Denis Callinan enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 18th of September 1916. Leaving behind his wife Annie, he began training with reinforcements of the 55th Infantry Battalion. He embarked for active service later that year, sailing from Sydney on the troop ship Arsenigus. After several weeks at sea, Private Callinan arrived in England in late December 1916. He spent the weeks that followed training before illness forced him into a short hospital stay. He rejoined his comrades in early February 1917 and travelled to France with them at the end of the month. In March, Callinan was transferred to the 18th Battalion, joining his unit in the aftermath of its involvement in heavy fighting around Wallencourt a month earlier. Soon after joining his new unit, German forces began making a strategic withdrawal to the Hindenburg Line. Over the weeks which followed, Callinan and his comrades were drawn into pursuit of the enemy. This retreat eventually halted near the village of Bullecourt, where Allied forces made 2 costly attempts to break through the enemy lines. Callinan was involved in the second attack on Bullecourt in May 1917, but survived the battle unscathed, despite Australian units suffering more than 7,000 casualties. After the bloodshed at Bullecourt, the 18th Battalion made its way to Belgium, taking up positions around Ypres salient. Callinan and his comrades were involved in several more costly battles at Menin Road in September and Polkapel in October. Afterwards, they saw out the remainder of the year manning the trenches during a cold and bleak winter. During the spring of 1918, German forces launched a major offensive, making multiple concentrated attacks at strategic points along the Allied front. In April, Callinan's battalion was rushed to defend the town of Villeneuve-Bretonneux, which was 20 kilometres from the vital railway city of Amiens. After helping to repulse an attack there, it moved to the vicinity of Warlor, where it helped to hold the front lines in the face of increasing pressure from the enemy. By the end of the month, the 18th Battalion was preparing for further attacks, and the men were put to work digging trenches and fortifying their positions. Callinan was engaged in this work on the 29th of April when he was struck by a piece of shell, suffering a serious wound to his back. Stretcher bearers rushed him to a casualty clearing station for treatment, but he died of his wounds later that day. News of Callinan's death was met with sadness amongst his family and the members of the racing community. He was remembered in the newspapers, including a poem which read, "Another hero gone to rest, to sleep forever with the best. He knew what honour was at stake, and so for king and country's sake, he sacrificed his worthy life, was foremost in the thickest strife, and now he reaps the great reward, meted out by thee, O Lord." Denis Callinan was 29 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Denis Callinan, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.